Mr. Dubovne, you have several items. My understanding is you are waiving presentation on AB 221, 259, 1269, 1292, and 1319. Is that correct?
Yes, I'd also like to, if possible, Mr. Chair, 160 and 1131.
They're not on our agenda for today.
Thank you.
But you do have a due pass recommendation on AB 1358. So go ahead.
I'll keep it brief. Thank you. I just wanted to really take the time to thank not only this committee for taking this bill today, but really all the supporters of it. AB 1358 is a straightforward bill to authorize and extend design build authority for school districts on projects over $1 million until the year 2025. It is important to note that this bill does not require school districts to utilize design build, nor does it touch traditional design build processes. This bill simply expands options for school districts to use design build and makes changes to requirements for contractors to pre-qualify for design build contracts. Committee analysis indicated that this bill is not anticipated to have a significant fiscal impact and that implementing the bill will have minor absorbable costs to the state. Today we have several guests that will be speaking on behalf of the bill. I'd also like to stress that this is a great opportunity to put more men and women in our state working on these projects in labor agreements that will make sure they're making a fair wage to help build our schools and make sure they're at the topmost quality for safety and construction. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. We're the sponsors of this legislation. I'd like to just let everybody know that this language in this bill is the same as last year's SB 785, which was a global fix to the design build statutes. We are just with this bill, including school districts under those provisions in that bill. That was a bipartisan bill last year that passed overwhelmingly. This is going to save the state and school districts money, especially in this era of a dwindling school bond. The existing school bond is getting critically low on funds, requiring a skilled and trained workforce on these projects. A workforce that has been trained in a state-approved apprenticeship program is going to ensure that these school construction projects are done right the first time in the least amount of time, and hopefully coming in at or under budget. It also ensures a local workforce. If you have to use workers under a certain percentage who have graduated from state-approved apprenticeship programs, those workers are going to live in California, hopefully live in the area where the school is being built. And finally, I just want to say there are 55,000 registered apprentices. The pipeline of apprentices to meet the mandates in this bill exists. Those 55,000 apprentices exist in union and non-union programs. The vast majority exist in what is known as joint labor management apprenticeship programs that are run concurrently by labor and management. The pipeline is there. It can be met. And pre-qualification requirements that school districts have to follow now when they use state school bond dollars will ensure that they can be able to choose contractors who do utilize workers from state-approved apprenticeship programs. For those reasons, we're happy to support the bill. Urge your aye vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Mitch Seaman with the California Labor Federation, also proud to support the bill. As mentioned in a variety of ways, this bill not only protects workers, but it also improves efficiency and cuts costs, and we urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman and members, Richard Markson, representing the American Fire Sprinkler Association, the Air Conditioning Trade Association, the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of California, Associated Builders and Contractors of San Diego, and the Western Electrical Contractors Association. Owing to your suggestion that we avoid the policy discussion, leave it to say that we are opposed to the policy provisions in the measure. However, we would point out that you're in your own analysis there were cautionary notes that were associated with the additional costs that could accrue to school districts that wanted to use this owing to the rather tenuous nature of being able to provide the skilled and trained workforce that is a requirement of the bill. We are opposed on the policy and very concerned about the fiscal impact on school districts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senators Julianne Broyles here on behalf of Associated Builders and Contractors of California. Also, for the points that Mr. Markson brought up regarding the policy issues, as the sponsors noted, in their testimony, there is a very big discussion going on about how this will impact the apprenticeship programs here in California. There is both, as they noted, joint and unilateral programs. Language in the bill, and particularly in Section 17520.25, has some very unique language. It says apprentice programs approved by the state of California or approved by the feds and located outside of California. It's a very big issue for us. We believe that this will basically say that if you live across the street from a school and you have gone through an apprenticeship program here in California but was approved by the federal government, all of our programs have to meet all of the same requirements, all of our programs have the same standards, but you would not be able to work on that because your program was approved by the Fed but located inside of California. Some very problematic language. We think there's going to be a big cost with these bills as they go through. At this point, it's appropriate that they go to suspense and have further consideration. Ask for no vote.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in opposition.
Mr. Chair, Phil Vermeulen representing the Golden State Builders Exchanges. We too have a serious concern about the skilled and trained workforce provisions in the bill. We don't believe there's going to be enough manpower available as these language grows. There's many bills that have this language in it, and we have a major concern about that. So for those reasons, we would urge some caution. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in opposition. Finance.
We don't have a position on this bill, but like the committee analysis, we would note that there could be additional project costs for local educational agencies that use this authority relative to the current law governing their design build projects.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? Senator Hill. Do you have a question? Okay. No questions. Members, this does have a due pass recommendation.
I just have one question.
Absolutely. Senator Bates.
There's been a lot of issues raised, and much of them are policy. So we're looking at the finances. I think the financial implications for school districts are huge, and I'm wondering, Chairman, why we aren't asking this to go to suspense so we can take a deeper look at that.
So our analysis, and I just clarified that with our consultant, is that the costs are at the local level and not at the state level. So therefore, it doesn't meet the suspense requirement. So that was that's our analysis.
It doesn't affect the bonds, the education bonds, because of the cost? I mean, we haven't had an analysis of that.
One second. I want to make sure we get your answer.
That's right.
Well, I know.
So, but make sure you address.
So just to clarify, Madam Vice Chair, our analysis indicates that there could be some potential cost pressures to the bond, but there's also potential cost savings. And so hence why we're moving with the due pass recommendation. And perhaps we can have Senator Dababne in his close highlight what some of those cost savings are. So we'll make sure we do that. If there's no further questions or comments, Mr. Dababne, please feel free to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Madam Vice Chair, for your questions. It's important to remember that these projects are already on prevailing wage, and I will turn over in a minute to Jeremy Smith to answer a little bit more in detail some of the questions raised. But what we're really saying here is that this is, first of all, the choice of the school districts to build or not using this mechanism. This was something that was left out of the bill last year that Senator Walk put in that was passed in a very bipartisan way for just about every other project you can think of within our state. It's important to remember this requires, and this is one of the provisions, requires a design build entity provide payment and performance bonds for the project in the form and in the amount required by the awarding authority issued by a California admitted surety. The amount of the payment bond shall not be less than the amount of the performance bond. It also requires award of the contract to be made and to be the reasonable, responsible design build entity whose proposal is determined to offer the best value to the public and requires the school district or public announce its award as specified. There's a number of other requirements. I won't read all of them, but they're in the analysis. One final one requires a design-build contractor to provide errors and omissions insurance coverage for the design element of the project. There's a lot of savings that's going to come from these design-build projects. This is still the choice of those school districts, but it will give an opportunity to be able to not only make sure that we're building the safest, most up-to-date facilities for our children to be able to go and learn in a safe environment, but they're also doing it with local labor, apprentice labor that will make sure that economic impact stays in our communities. Too often when you go to one of these work sites, you see trucks with Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Texas license plates. That's fine, but I prefer to make sure that these jobs are going to local labor to keep that money back in our economy. With that, I will ask Jeremy to address one of the specific questions. Briefly.
Of course, sure. It's important to note this is an alternative delivery method. Sorry, Jeremy Smith, State Building Trades. They don't have to use design build. This is just if they want to use design build, it allows them the opportunity to utilize this. They make the decision on a local level what delivery method they want to use based on what the issues on the ground are. And the federal state apprenticeship issue, there are federal programs that meet the requirements to train apprentices. If a person moves to the state, hasn't been through a local program, they should not be allowed to work on a project just because they haven't been through a program if they've been trained under the federal auspices of the apprenticeship system that prevail there. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bates, you have a follow-up
Just one
question?
final comment. They really don't have a free choice. They have to have a project labor agreement. Isn't that correct?
No, they don't have to have a project labor agreement. If they don't want to do the reporting requirements of the bill, PLA will get them out from under that. But a project labor agreement is a locally agreed to agreement that is specific to a specific project and will adhere to the requirements of this legislation. So that's why that was put in there to ensure that on a local level, if they decide to do a PLA, they have to also follow the law as written under this bill.
But it is conditioned, so it's not a clear, untethered choice at the local level. I mean, there are very clear requirements and conditions compared to what they currently have as in terms of local control. And I think that's important to make that point.
Thank you, Senator Bates. With that, I don't see any additional questions or comments on this item. There's a motion by Senator Hill. Secretary, please call the roll.
The motion is due pass to the Senate floor. Laura?
Aye.
Laura, aye. Bates?
No?
Bates, no. Bell? Hill? Hill, aye. Leyva? Mendoza? Nielsen? Nielsen, no.
Thank you, Mr. Robinette. We'll hold this item open to allow other folks to add on. Next, we have Mr. Patterson. Thank you for being so patient. Mr. Patterson, where are your items?
The AB 649, we will waive presentation. We understand that goes to
Perfect.
To suspense, and then we have a due pass for AB 483, and we will present. Is that correct?
Yes, you do.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead.
With respect to 649, when it does come up for your, when it's eligible to be taken off suspense, would respectfully request that it come off of suspense. There's been unanimous support throughout the entire legislative process. It's been supported by law enforcement and health providers as well for a lot of good reasons. And I appreciate also then the opportunity to present AB 483. This implements a pro-rating system for initial fees, license fees in certain professions. This is similar to successful programs currently in place at the State Dental Board and the Acupuncture Board. Under this bill, licensees will pay only for the amount of months that their first license will be valid before it must be renewed. Existing policies force licensees to pay full 2-year issuance fees even if their license will not be valid for that entire 2-year term. While some boards may incur some costs from adjusting to this new licensing structure, the loss is the result of them ending their current policy of overcharging new licensees for a short-term license, as well as minor costs from adjusting their computer systems to make this change. This bill has received strong bipartisan support. It passed every committee unanimously throughout the legislative process. I have Christina DeCaro here with me. She's from the California Veterinary Medical Association in support of the bill.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Christina DeCaro, representing the California Veterinary Medical Association. We would just note that the average debt load for the graduates coming out of the UC Davis Veterinary School right now is $135,000. So anything we can do to help them sort of ease back in with all of the fees that will be compounding would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great color. Additional witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition. Finance.
We're neutral on the provisions of this bill, which would result in a more fair payment system for initial license fees affecting licensees at a number of the DCA boards.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? And just to be clear, you're accepting the amendments, correct?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Seeing no questions or comments on this item, this has a do pass as amended recommendation. There's a motion by Senator Hill. Secretary, please call the roll.
The motion is do pass as amended to the Senate floor. Laura?
Aye.
Laura, aye. Bates? Bates, aye. Bell? Hill? Hill, aye. Leyva? Mendoza? Nielsen? Nielsen, aye.
Currently 4-0. We'll keep that item open. Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Pettis.
Chairman, members, thank you very much.
Next, we have Ms. Burke. Please come forward.
Good
Ms.
afternoon.
Burke, you have one item, AB 522. It's a candidate for suspense. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators. Assembly Bill 522 directs the California Department of Technology to create a standardized contractor performance assessment system when awarding information technology contracts and projects. Currently, Caltech is developing a vendor performance evaluation system, but there is no guarantee that they will implement the evaluation system in a long-term capacity. In fact, a simple change of leadership with Caltech could put the evaluation system in jeopardy. With this bill, we can ensure that the evaluation system will be operational by January 1st, 2017, and additionally give the legislature much-needed oversight on the issue. Unfortunately, Department of Finance has come out in opposition of this measure. However, it's important to note that I've worked with the industry stakeholders on amendments outlined in the committee analysis to ensure that vendors have a minimum of 30 days to respond to a final evaluation. This amendment will offer vendors a chance to contest a negative assessment given by the state. Currently, the state has 44 IT projects under development that are reported to cost more than $4 billion. By tracking vendors' quality and performance on these expansive projects, we can ensure that the state is getting what they pay for. AB 522 is a starting point to improve our state's IT projects, and I recognize we have a long way to go. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Witnesses in support.
Mr. Chair, members, Chris McKaylee on behalf of the Computing Technology Industry Association, as well as a small systems integrator, Natoma Technologies. We've been working with the author on these remaining amendments. As to the fiscal effect, Mr. Chair, the federal government for the last 2 decades has used this exact type of vendor performance scorecard with 6 questions. It takes between 5 and 10 minutes for the federal agency department personnel to complete. They are willing to allow the state of California to use it for free at no charge. It confounds me to try to understand why DGS or Caltech thinks it'll cost $350,000 to develop this. And then ongoing costs, again, it can take between 5 and 10 minutes for the state official to actually complete it. There should be little minor and absorbable costs at best, with all due respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition. Finance.
I don't have a position on this bill, and so I'm not sure sort of what the communication was in terms of our opposition that the author had spoken to. What I do have is a note that the fiscal impact of the bill may vary widely. It requires Caltech to develop a standardized vendor performance evaluation system by January 1, 2017, but the bill doesn't describe what kind of system is required, and so we're still evaluating.
Thank you. Just on your analysis, it says oppose.
You're right.
And I'll get that. I'm sorry, I don't have that.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments or questions from committee? Seeing none, Ms. Burke, would you like to close?
I respectfully request your aye vote.
Thank you. We will, without objection, move this item to the suspense file and look forward to clarifying finance's position.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Mathis. Mr. Mathis, you have one item, AB 954, counted for suspense. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Today I'm presenting AB 954, a bill which will create a new grant and low-interest loan program to help homeowners pay for vital life-sustaining drinking water and wastewater improvements. Specifically, AB 954 will enable homeowners who are otherwise ineligible for traditional financing such as bank loans or other state and federal programs to deepen or improve their existing groundwater wells, connect to their local service lines, and install systems to treat contaminated groundwater. This bill provides tools to some of our poorest and most vulnerable communities to enable them to regain a bare minimum quality of life that many of us take for granted on a daily basis. This bill has had unanimous support throughout the legislative process, and there's no formal opposition. Assemblyman Alejo is also a joint author and said he was going to try to make it here, but it appears he hasn't.
We already had Mr. Alejo long enough here. He's fine. You can do it. On your own. Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Robinson on behalf of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. We appreciate Assemblymember Mathis' efforts in this area. Our county citizens face some of the worst impacts related to the drought, and this bill would provide them with some funding mechanisms that can help them get access to water. So we ask for your aye vote.
Additional witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition. Finance.
We're opposed to this bill. The bill allocates significant general fund resources that we think should be considered along with other general fund priorities through the annual budget process. I mean, it transfers 10 million general fund.
Correct. Thank you. Any comments or questions from committee? Mr. Mathis, would you like to close?
Yes. Finance obviously says, 10 million's a lot, but according to our conversations with the Water Board, they don't have much of an opportunity to achieve the economy of the scale for the amount of the 10 million, since they need to develop a new program, guidelines, and cost controls for the bill's provisions, which would be the case, 10 million, 100 million. The thing about it is that there's jobs that aren't being filled that are already marked, so eating the cost is within their own budget. But to go furthermore, the board currently has 56 vacancies listed on CalHR on their website. So it's not like there's not jobs that are open and available for the program to move forward with. Again, I respectfully ask for your aye vote. What this bill does is it provides that gap that's missed by other funding and helps those that are in severe need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis. Without objection, we move this item to suspense file. Look forward to working with you on this item.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, it looks like we don't have any assembly members here, so we're going to work the agenda. Next, we're going to move to Mr. Gatto's remaining items. AB 10, members, this is AB 10 on the agenda. Witnesses in support, witnesses in opposition. Finance.
The Department of Finance is opposed to this bill because it would result in additional general fund costs inconsistent with the current budget to make marginal changes to existing law that already places restrictions and prohibitions on candidates and office holders related to contributions and economic interest disclosures. FPPC estimates that there would be one-time costs of $342,000 general fund for 2.5 positions for the regulations, compliance materials, and revising the statement of economic interest form. Ongoing costs would be $130,000.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? Seeing none, without objection, we move this item to the suspense file. AB 824, witnesses in support, witnesses in opposition. Finance.
We're opposed to this bill, which adds state coordination with federal fire prevention activities to the state's scope of fire prevention and adds additional annual reporting requirements because it creates cost pressures that are not part of this administration's current fiscal plan. CAL FIRE estimates the need for 2 positions and general fund costs of $302,000 in 16-17 and $279,000 ongoing.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? Seeing and hearing none, without objection, we move this item to suspense file. Moving on to AB 1164, witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition. Finance.
We're opposed. This bill appropriates $300 million general fund.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? Seeing none, we'll move this item to suspense file. Moving on to AB 1310, witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition. Finance.
Department of Finance is neutral on this bill because it establishes a process to address jurisdictional challenges in prosecuting cybersexual exploitation crimes. According to the Judicial Council, there will be no fiscal impact as a result of this bill.
Comments or questions from committee? Seeing and hearing none, without objection, we move this item to suspense file. Last GADO item is AB 1492, witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition. Finance.
Department of Finance is opposed to this bill because it also results in significant general fund costs that are not a part of the budget or the administration's current fiscal plan. DOJ indicates that it will incur costs to enhance the current DNA database system. Specifically, the Criminal Justice Information Services Division will need 2 positions to perform the necessary analysis, development, testing, and implementation at an estimated cost of $195,000 general fund in 15-16 and $306,000 general fund ongoing. The DOJ also anticipates that this would be a 12-month project beginning January 1, 2016, but the implementation date would need to be changed 12 months from the date of project approval or the date of appropriation, whichever is later. DOJ also estimates unknown potentially significant general fund costs for possible increase due to an increase in litigation regarding the reduction in DNA database collection.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? Seeing none, without objection, we move that item to suspense file. We have Assemblywoman Brown here. Should come forward. Ms. Brown, you have a couple items here, committee and personal items. My understanding is you're waiving presentation on one, AB 1156. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's start with AB 348.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you for the opportunity to present 348. This is a bill, Mr. Chair, to protect frail seniors. Don't forget, this population is growing by 1,000 people each and every day for the next 13 and a half years. We're talking about your mothers. We're talking about your grandmothers, your aunts and your uncles, those of you who are young enough to still have those in your life. Most nursing homes do amazing work, and for that, the legislature has renewed a quality assurance fee to reward them with a 3.62 reimbursement increase every year for the next 5 years. But when things go wrong, this population is least able to defend themselves and resolve issues related to poor care. This population is 100% dependent upon the services of DPH regulators to do so. AB 348 is a simple but powerful bill that would build on last year or this year's trailer bill, the health trailer bill in the Budget Act, SB 75. SB 75 requires the Department of Public Health to complete nursing home complaint investigations within reasonable timelines of 90 days to start, and then 60 days once the recruitment and training of new staff is completed, beginning in 2018. But SB 75 only applies to complaints submitted by a consumer or a consumer's representative. Thousands of additional reports are submitted by facilities. So I have amended AB 348 to establish the same timelines for completing investigations of facility reports as SB 75 applies to public complaints. I've asked Julie Pollack from the California Advocate for Nursing Home Reform and Gary Passmore to join me.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Social worker with California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform. When abuse and neglect occurs in a nursing home, California law requires that the facility report it to the Department of Public Health. AB 348 is simply a bill to hold the department accountable to investigate these reports within a reasonable time frame. Earlier this year, the legislature funded 300 new positions at the department. This was based on the department's own estimate of their current workload, which included ERIs, or reports made by the facilities. ERIs have always been a part of the department's workload, and with no timelines, there will be no accountability. The reality is, it's actually more efficient to investigate complaints of abuse when they're first reported, when medical records, evidence is still available, and witnesses are still available. The timelines in this bill will be phased in over 4 years to coincide with the expansion in the department's workload, and even according to the department's own estimates, would have no fiscal impact until 2017-18. As a social worker, I know how badly AB 348 is needed as an advocate for elderly residents in nursing homes. It will not only make the department's investigation process more efficient, but it will serve as a deterrent. When there's accountability on nursing homes and the Department of Public Health, it will reduce the number of cases of elder abuse and neglect that need to be reported. Thank you.
Chair Laura, members, Gary Passmore with the Congress of California Seniors. I would add 2 points, well, 3. One is to let you all know that this bill was widely supported on a bipartisan basis during all of the policy committee hearings on it. But more specifically, first, I want you all to remember that this is not a general fund issue. These are fee-based revenues in a special fund. Secondly, there were some statements made in your consultant analysis that don't really jibe with my 12-year knowledge of this issue, and I hope that I have the opportunity to resolve those questions while it's in suspense. We urge you to support it when it comes off.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition. Are you in support? Go ahead.
Yes, Deborah Doctor, Disability Rights California, in support.
Thank you. Witnesses in opposition. Finance.
We're opposed to this bill because it would result in a significant fee increase on the long-term health care facilities as well as general fund costs for state facilities licensed by the Department of Public Health. The 2015 Budget Act provided a number of new positions for the licensing and certification program, which others have noted, and included statutory changes to the timelines in which complaint investigations have to be completed. Right now, the Department of Public Health lacks capacity to complete the current volume of entity-reported incident workload within the timeframes mandated by this bill because it's in the process of hiring and training the more than 225 newly authorized staff positions. Implementing the program quality improvement activities and working through an accumulation of open long-term care complaints and entity-reported incidents. The Department of Public Health estimates that this bill will result in total annual fund costs of $18.4 million, beginning in 2017-18, at least $2.5 million of which would be general fund. The department states it would need an additional 123 new permanent positions to complete this workload. We're continuing to work with the Department of Public Health on that estimate, but we do agree the annual cost would likely be several million.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? Seeing none, Ms. Brown, would you like to close?
Accountability, accountability, accountability. People sent me to Sacramento so that we can make sure that government is accountable. The Department of Public Health and everyone else should be accountable to the people, and seniors should not have to suffer because we can't make a decision to do this. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on this common sense measure.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Without objection, we move this item to the suspense file. Your next 2 items are aging and long-term committee bills.